A shocking truth often hidden in the dark annals of justice is that across history, more wrongful convictions have been overturned due to persistent, often extra-legal investigations by victims' families than by official law enforcement. For Elias Vance, that chilling statistic wasn't just a historical footnote. It was the blueprint for a life-altering metamorphosis. Alias, a man whose hands were accustomed to the delicate precision of a watchmaker's tools and the gentle touch of a father, felt them clench into fists as he stared at the smoldering remains of his home. The vibrant yellow of his daughter Lily's swing set, once a joyful blur, was now a twisted, blackened sculpture of despair. His wife Sarah, a woman whose laugh could chase away the darkest clouds, was gone. And Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, whose boundless energy and infectious curiosity filled every corner of their lives, had been silenced forever. The official report, delivered with the detached empathy of seasoned detectives, spoke of a tragic electrical fire, a devastating accident. But Elias knew, with an instinct that gnawed at his soul, that it was a lie. The shattered window, the faint scent of accelerant he'd caught before the firefighters hosed everything down. These details screamed betrayal. Detective Miller, a man whose weary eyes had seen too much human cruelty, tried to offer solace. Sometimes, Vance, things just happen. But Elias saw the doubt flicker in Miller's gaze, a momentary recognition of the gaping holes in the story that official channels were too quick to seal. Elias, however, wasn't interested in official channels anymore. He was interested in truth, and a justice that felt increasingly unreachable. He walked away from the ashes of his life, not towards a future, but back into the past, into the shadows of what had been, seeking the answers that the world refused to give him. He retraced his steps, combed through the debris long after the official cleanup, finding a single, charred playing card, the Queen of Spades, tucked beneath a loose floorboard in Lily's room, a detail overlooked by every professional. It meant nothing to the police. To Elias, it was a whisper from the grave, a piece of a puzzle only he could see. He interviewed neighbors, friends, anyone who had passed by that night, meticulously jotting down every word, every fleeting glance. He delved into the dark corners of the internet, educating himself on arson investigations, forensic science, the intricate dance of criminal psychology. His small apartment, once meticulously organized, became a chaotic web of newspaper clippings, crime scene photos, and red string connecting theories. Weeks bled into months, each sunrise a reminder of his failure to find the culprits. He started with a small, unnoticed detail: the fire chief's unusual eagerness to declare it an accident, the swiftness with which the insurance company settled, no questions asked, the abrupt transfer of Detective Miller to another precinct just when Elias thought he was gaining an ally. These weren't coincidences, they were threads in a larger, darker tapestry. His quest led him down forgotten alleys, into the smoky haze of backroom poker games, and eventually to a name: the Jackals. A notorious local crime syndicate, known for their ruthlessness and their unsettling calling card. A single playing card left at their scenes of destruction. And their preferred card, the Queen of Spades. Elias's blood ran cold. The card from Lily's room. It wasn't an accident. It was a message, a declaration. His family had been targets. But why? Elias, armed with a newfound terrifying purpose, shed the last vestiges of his old self. He sold off his remaining possessions, including the precision tools of his trade, investing every penny into equipment for his grim task. Cameras, listening devices, lock-picking kits, and a small, worn handgun he bought legally, though its true purpose was anything but. He trained his body, once content with the quiet solitude of his workshop, pushing it to its limits, running until his lungs burned learning self-defense techniques from online videos and forgotten martial arts manuals from the library. He became a ghost, moving through the city's underbelly, observing, listening, meticulously compiling data. His first real lead came through a local informant, a small-time drug dealer named Sketch, whose fear of the Jackals was only matched by his need for money. Sketch, with his twitchy eyes and constant paranoia, spoke of a man named Marcus Torch Thorne, a known arsonist for the syndicate, whose signature was the precise use of accelerants and a chilling efficiency. Torch was a phantom, leaving no trace, no witnesses. But Sketch, in a moment of intoxicated bravado, mentioned Torch's unusual affinity for a specific brand of rare, imported whiskey, found only at a single exclusive jazz club downtown. He learned Torch's routines, his preferred table, the way he held his glass, the subtle twitch in his left eye when he was about to make a move. Torch was a man of precise habits, a dangerous pattern that Elias learned to exploit. One humid evening, as Torch lingered at the bar, nursing his amber-colored whiskey, Elias made his move. He slipped a tiny tracking device, no bigger than a fingernail, onto the underside of Torch's expensive watch. The tracker led Elias to a dilapidated warehouse district on the edge of the city, a labyrinth of forgotten industries. Torch had a secluded workshop there, where the smell of chemicals and burnt wood lingered in the air. Elias, now a master of stealth, observed Torch through the broken windows, meticulously documenting his every move, his contacts, his methods. He watched as Torch meticulously prepared a series of incendiary devices, his hands, calloused and scarred, moving with a chilling familiarity. Elias realized Torch was planning another job. The fire was to be a message, a demonstration of power, and a way to quickly clear a valuable piece of land. Elias knew he couldn't stop Torch by going to the police. They were either compromised or too slow. He had to become the intervention. The night of the planned arson, the air crackled with anticipation. Elias, clad in dark clothing, his face obscured, moved like a shadow across the rooftops. He saw Torch enter the community center, a gasoline can glinting ominously in the moonlight. Elias waited, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He couldn't just stop the fire. He needed to extract information, a confession, something tangible that would connect Torch, and by extension, the Jackals, to his family's murder. As Torch began to douse the old wooden floorboards with accelerant, the pungent smell rising in the stale air, Elias descended. He moved with a speed and precision born of desperation, disarming Torch before the arsonist could even register his presence. The struggle was brutal, silent, and swift. Elias, fueled by a rage he'd meticulously controlled, easily overpowered the wiry arsonist, slamming him against a support beam. "Who sent you?" Elias's voice was a guttural whisper, unrecognizable even to himself. "Why my family? The Queen of Spades, Torch. What did it mean?" Torch, gasping for air, his eyes wide with surprise and fear, snarled, "Don't know what you're talking about, freak. Just a job." But Elias saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the subtle shift in his composure. Elias pressed harder, a cold, calculated fury guiding his actions. He tied Torch securely, then began to dismantle the man's carefully constructed composure piece by agonizing piece. He showed Torch the charred Queen of Spades, pulled from a plastic evidence bag. "This was in my daughter's room. Tell me what it means, or I swear to God you'll feel every burn you've ever inflicted." Under duress, Torch finally broke, his voice a pathetic whimper. He confessed to setting the fire, admitting it was a contract from the Jackals. The Queen of Spades was indeed their calling card, marking their territory, their claim. But as for why Elias's family, Torch was frustratingly vague. Boss just said they were in the way. A message. Sarah had inherited a small, undeveloped lot on the outskirts of Havenwood, a forgotten parcel of land. It was almost worthless, or so they thought. The information was a bitter victory. He left Torch bound and gagged, leaving an anonymous tip for the police about the arsonist's capture and the averted fire at the community center. He knew Torch's confession, extracted under duress, wouldn't hold up in court for his family's murder, but it was a link, a crucial first step. Elias disappeared into the night, the image of his daughter's swing set, now a symbol of his burning quest, seared into his mind. His path was clear. He had to find the boss. His investigation pivoted, focusing now on the intricate web of real estate dealings in Havenwood. He delved into land registries, property records, and zoning commissions. Its value, initially negligible, had skyrocketed overnight, transforming it into a linchpin for a massive commercial development. The Jackals weren't just a crime syndicate, they were deeply entrenched in the city's infrastructure, manipulating property, exploiting loopholes, and removing obstacles, sometimes permanently. One such lieutenant was Victor the Vulture Kovacs, a brutal enforcer with a reputation for extreme violence and an unshakable loyalty to the architect. Kovacs was the architect's public face, the man who handled the dirty work, the intimidation, the negotiations. Elias began to track Kovacs. It was a dangerous game, one that required infinite patience and an iron nerve. He learned Kovacs' habits, his preference for a particular brand of expensive cigar, his weekly visits to a high-end poker club, his late-night drives through the city in a black armored SUV. Elias, now a master of surveillance, meticulously documented Kovacs' movements, piecing together the fragments of a much larger, insidious network. He discovered that Kovacs frequently met with a seemingly legitimate businessman, Mr. Harrison Thorne, CEO of Thorne Development, a company deeply involved in the new highway expansion and the controversial commercial development near Sarah's land. Was Harrison related to Marcus Torch Thorne? The pieces began to click into place, forming a disturbing mosaic of corruption and murder. Harrison Thorne, Elias discovered, was indeed Torch's elder brother, the respectable face of the family, but equally ruthless in his own way. He used Thorne Development as a front, legitimizing the Jackals' illicit gains and ensuring their control over the city's growth. The architect, Elias theorized, was pulling the strings from an even deeper shadow, using men like Harrison and Kovacs as his pawns. Sarah's land, a seemingly insignificant parcel, had been the key to the entire development, and her refusal to sell had made her, and by extension her family, an inconvenient obstacle to be eliminated. The realization ignited a cold fury within Elias. His family hadn't been random victims, they had been sacrificed for profit, for power. The injustice was a searing brand on his soul. He understood now that simply bringing the Jackals to justice wouldn't be enough. He had to dismantle their entire empire, expose the architect, and sever the cancerous ties that bound the city to this criminal enterprise. He had to become the force that would tear down their carefully constructed world. His next move was to infiltrate Thorne Development. He meticulously crafted a new identity, a convincing backstory as a freelance financial consultant specializing in property acquisition. He used his deep knowledge of Havenwood's real estate market, gleaned from weeks of obsessive research, to secure a meeting with one of Thorne Development's mid-level executives. Elias, outwardly calm and professional, was a coiled spring of vengeance, every interaction a calculated step towards his ultimate goal. He spoke with authority, weaving a fabricated narrative of wanting to invest in Havenwood's burgeoning market, hinting at potential insider knowledge that piqued the executive's interest. The executive, a slick, opportunistic man named Greg, saw an opportunity for a quick buck and an easy mark. He unknowingly granted Elias access to Thorne Development's internal data, hoping to impress him and secure his investment. Elias spent weeks poring over financial statements, project proposals, and legal documents. He uncovered a labyrinth of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and shady land deals. A complex money laundering operation disguised as legitimate business. He found clear evidence of bribery, extortion, and fraudulent contracts, all leading back to the Jackals, and increasingly to the shadowy figure of the architect. The deeper Elias dug, the more he understood the scope of the Jackals' power. They had council members on their payroll, police officers in their pockets, and judges under their thumb. The entire city was a chessboard, and the architect was playing a masterful, deadly game. Elias knew that simply presenting this evidence to the authorities wouldn't work. It would be buried, dismissed, or worse, used against him. He needed to strike at the heart of their operation, expose them in a way that couldn't be ignored, and force the justice system to act. His focus narrowed to the upcoming public hearing for the new commercial development, the very project for which his wife's land had been sacrificed. This hearing was critical for Thorne development, the final hurdle before construction could begin. Elias saw it as his opportunity, his stage to expose the architect and bring down his empire. He meticulously planned his strategy, knowing that one wrong move could cost him his life and negate his entire quest for justice. He started by cultivating a small network of disgruntled insiders, a former employee of Thorne Development who had been unfairly dismissed, a low-level city hall clerk disgusted by the rampant corruption, and even a retired investigative journalist who had been silenced years ago after trying to expose the Jackals. Elias offered them anonymity, protection, and a chance for redemption. He showed them snippets of the evidence he'd collected, enough to convince them that he wasn't just a conspiracy theorist, but a man driven by a profound, righteous anger. The journalist, a grizzled veteran named Martin Thorne, no relation to Harrison or Torch thankfully, proved to be an invaluable asset. He had connections in the media, a deep understanding of investigative reporting, and a healthy skepticism towards official narratives. Martin, seeing in Elias a reflection of his younger, more idealistic self, agreed to help, but only if Elias promised to bring irrefutable proof, something that would resonate with the public and force an official inquiry. Martin cautioned Elias, the architect won't let you live if you expose him. He'll silence you, just like he silenced so many others. Elias simply nodded, his eyes devoid of fear. What more could they take? Elias learned that the architect held clandestine meetings at a secluded, heavily guarded estate on the outskirts of Havenwood, a fortress disguised as a sprawling, idyllic country home. This was where the real power brokers met, where the city's fate was decided in hushed tones over expensive whiskey. Getting inside was nearly impossible, but Elias knew it was the only way to get undeniable proof of the architect's identity and his direct involvement. He needed recordings, documents, something that would leave no doubt. He spent weeks mapping the estate's perimeter, observing the patrol routes of the security guards, the blind spots in the surveillance system. He noticed a pattern in the delivery schedule for fresh produce and gourmet supplies. This was his opening. Using his innate skill for precision and his acquired expertise in infiltration, he meticulously planned his entry. He forged delivery manifests, created a fake uniform, and even learned the specific lingo used by the delivery drivers. The night of the architect's quarterly meeting, Elias, disguised as a food delivery man, calmly navigated the estate's security checkpoints. His heart hammered in his chest, but his movements were smooth, practiced. He delivered his goods to the kitchen, then under the guise of using the restroom, slipped away. He moved through the opulent corridors like a ghost, his senses heightened, every shadow a potential threat. He planted miniature recording devices in strategic locations, the main meeting room, the architect's private study, even the central server room. He downloaded encrypted files from the network, a treasure trove of incriminating data. As he was about to make his escape, a low, gravelly voice stopped him cold. Lost friend? Elias turned to see Victor Kovacs, the vulture, standing in the dimly lit hallway, a predatory smirk on his face. Kovacs' eyes, sharp and calculating, raked over Elias, sensing something amiss. You're not one of the usual guys. What's your name, delivery boy? Elias knew this was it. He had to think fast. He stammered a fabricated name, his voice intentionally shaky. New guy, Mr. Kovac. Sorry, just trying to find my way out. Kovacs wasn't fooled. He took a step closer, his hand subtly drifting towards the weapon tucked inside his jacket. Funny, I haven't heard about any new hires. You seem a little too clean for this job. In a blur of motion, Elias struck. He disarmed Kovacs with a swift, brutal precision, the same techniques he'd practiced endlessly in the solitude of his apartment. The fight was a desperate, silent ballet of fists and feet, each blow fueled by the memory of Sarah and Lily. Kovacs was strong, but Elias, driven by a primal rage, fought with a ferocity that surprised even him. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for justice. He disabled Kovacs, leaving him unconscious but alive, a message to the architect that his walls had been breached. Elias vanished into the night, the encrypted data and audio recordings secured, leaving behind a bewildered security team and a furious architect. The next few days were a blur of intense activity. Elias and Martin Thorne worked tirelessly, deciphering the encrypted files, transcribing the audio recordings. The evidence was staggering. Detailed ledgers of bribes to city officials, explicit orders for arson and violence, money laundering schemes, and a meticulously crafted plan to consolidate control over Havenwood's entire economic landscape. And finally, the name of the architect, Alistair Finch. Finch was not a shadowy figure from the underworld, but a respected philanthropist, a prominent businessman, and a seemingly benevolent pillar of the Havenwood community. He chaired charity boards, funded local initiatives, and held lavish galas. The revelation sent a chill down Elias's soul. The architect of his family's destruction. The hypocrisy was a poisoned blade twisting in Elias's gut. With the unmasking of Alistair Finch, the pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with a horrifying clarity. Sarah's small plot of land, once considered negligible, had been the linchpin of Finch's grand design, a multi-billion-dollar commercial and residential complex, meticulously planned to capitalize on the proposed highway expansion. Her refusal to sell, her naive belief that the land held sentimental value from her childhood, had marked her for death. It was not just a message, it was a brutal demonstration of power, a warning to anyone who dared stand in Finch's way. The architect had not just ordered a murder, he had ordered an execution, cold and calculated, disguised as a tragic accident. He has more lawyers than the city council, and enough dirt on every official to shut down Havenwood for a decade. We need more than just recordings and ledgers. We need public outcry. We need to hit him where it hurts, his reputation. Elias knew Martin was right. Finch thrived on his public image, his carefully cultivated facade of benevolence. To expose him required not just evidence, but a narrative, a story that the public could not ignore. The upcoming public hearing for the commercial development was his stage, but it was also a trap. Finch would be there, surrounded by his cronies, his legal team, and a meticulously crafted presentation designed to sway public opinion. He meticulously planned his final act. He spent days honing his presentation, weaving together the disparate threads of evidence into a damning indictment. The shell corporations, the fraudulent contracts, the explicit orders for intimidation, the bribery of council members, it all coalesced into a portrait of systemic corruption orchestrated by Finch. But the centerpiece, the emotional core that would resonate with the public, was the story of his family. The innocent lives extinguished for a land deal. On the day of the hearing, the city council chambers buzzed with a tense energy. Media vans lined the streets outside, drawn by the whispers of controversy surrounding the development. Inside, Alistair Finch sat front and center, radiating an aura of calm authority, flanked by his legal team and Harrison Thorne. Across the room, Elias sat amongst the concerned citizens, an anonymous face in the crowd, his heart a drumbeat of anticipation and dread. Martin Thorne, pretending to be a general assignment reporter, had secured a seat in the press section, ready to disseminate Elias's findings the moment they were revealed. The hearing proceeded as expected. A parade of staged presentations from Thorne Development, praising the economic benefits of the project, showcasing glossy renderings of the proposed complex. Elias watched, his jaw tight, as the cynical ballet unfolded. Finally, it was the public comment section. One by one, local residents expressed concerns about traffic, environmental impact, and the destruction of green spaces. Finch listened with an air of patient indulgence, occasionally offering a reassuring smile or a dismissive wave. Then Elias's name was called. He rose slowly, a figure of quiet intensity. His eyes met Finch's, and for a fleeting moment he saw a flicker of unease, a tightening around the architect's eyes. Elias took a deep breath, the scent of dust and old paper filling his lungs. "My name is Elias Vance," he began, his voice clear, steady, yet filled with an undeniable tremor of suppressed emotion. "And I am here to speak not about traffic or green space, but about justice, about the true cost of this development." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. Then, with a voice that grew stronger with each sentence, he began to tell his story. He spoke of his wife Sarah and his daughter Lily. He described the night of the fire, the official pronouncements, and his own relentless, solitary quest for truth. He held up the charred Queen of Spades, not as a piece of evidence, but as a visceral symbol of his loss. "They told me it was an accident," Elias continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of the council members, the press, and finally settling on Finch. "A tragic electrical fire. But it was a lie orchestrated by the man who sits before you, feigning concern for Havenwood's future, while his hands are stained with the blood of its citizens." A gasp rippled through the room. Finch's lawyers immediately objected, shouting about slander and defamation. Finch himself, for the first time, looked genuinely rattled, his face paling, his composure cracking. But Elias pressed on, ignoring the uproar. "Alistair Finch, known to his loyal operatives as the architect, ordered the murder of my family. My wife's small plot of land, located strategically adjacent to the proposed highway expansion, was an inconvenience, an obstacle to his multi-billion-dollar project. Her refusal to sell made her a target, and her innocent 7-year-old daughter paid the ultimate price." He then projected images onto the large screen behind him. Screenshots of encrypted ledgers, audio transcripts of Finch's chilling directives to Kovacs, diagrams of shell corporations connecting Thorne Development directly to the Jackals' illicit activities. He showed photographs of Marcus Torch Thorne, the arsonist who had confessed to setting the fire, and drew a clear line connecting him to Harrison Thorne, Finch's legitimate frontman. "This," Elias declared, his voice ringing with authority, "is not a conspiracy theory. This is evidence. All orchestrated by Alistair Finch, the man who wants you to believe he is Havenwood's savior when in fact he is its destroyer." The room erupted into chaos. Journalists scrambled, cameras flashed, and council members looked wildly at each other, some genuinely shocked, others nervously eyeing Finch. Finch's lawyers were in a frenzy, demanding Elias be removed, threatening legal action. But the public, galvanized by Elias's raw emotion and the undeniable evidence flashing on the screen, began to shout, demanding answers, demanding justice. He had also sent a pre-prepared package of evidence to a secure location, a dead man's switch, ensuring the information would go public, even if Elias failed or was silenced. In the midst of the pandemonium, Alistair Finch, his face now a mask of cold fury, rose slowly from his seat. His eyes, burning with a dangerous intensity, locked onto Elias. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, the mask of benevolence utterly shattered. "You've made a grave mistake, Mr. Vance," Finch's voice cut through the noise, low and menacing. "A mistake you will not live to regret." But Elias merely smiled, a cold, empty smile that held no mirth, only resolve. "I have nothing left to lose, Finch. Now, I'm taking everything from you." Before Finch's security could react, before the council could regain control, a team of federal agents, alerted by Martin Thorne's earlier anonymous tips, and now by the public spectacle, stormed into the chamber, badges glinting. They moved swiftly, surrounding Finch, Harrison Thorne, and their closest associates. Alistair Finch, the lead agent, announced, his voice booming over the din. "You are under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, and a litany of other charges." But the agents were already placing him in handcuffs, leading him away. Harrison Thorne and others were also apprehended, their empires of deceit crumbling around them. The news spread like wildfire. Elias Vance, the quiet watchmaker, became a national hero. His story, a testament to resilience and unwavering resolve, captivated the nation. The public demanded a full investigation, and under the glare of intense media scrutiny, the corrupt network of the Jackals began to unravel. Victor Kovacs, still recovering from his encounter with Elias, was picked up in a coordinated raid on several Jackals safe houses. Marcus Torch Thorne, already in custody for the community center arson, found his prior confession to Elias, now backed by concrete evidence, coming back to haunt him with a vengeance. The city of Havenwood began a painful but necessary process of cleansing its corrupt institutions. Council members resigned, police officers were investigated, and judges faced impeachment. Yet for Elias, the public accolades and the arrest of Finch brought no sense of triumph, no true peace. The void left by Sarah and Lily was still a gaping chasm in his soul. He had become the fire that consumed his enemies, but in doing so, he had also scorched a part of himself. Weeks turned into months. The trials were long and arduous. Elias testified, his account harrowing, his evidence irrefutable. Finch, through his high-powered legal team, tried every trick in the book, discrediting Elias, claiming insanity, even attempting to have Elias charged with assault for his encounter with Kovacs and Torch. But the weight of the evidence, coupled with Elias's compelling testimony and Martin Thorne's relentless media coverage, proved too much. Alistair Finch, the architect of Havenwood's corruption, was convicted on multiple counts, including the murder of Sarah and Lily Vance. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, his vast empire dismantled, his name forever synonymous with greed and brutality. Harrison Thorne, Kovacs, and others received lengthy sentences as well. Justice, in its slow and grinding mechanism, had finally been served. The city of Havenwood slowly began to heal. The proposed commercial development, now tainted by scandal, was scrapped. Sarah's small plot of land, once the nexus of so much darkness, was eventually turned into a community garden, a vibrant, living memorial to the victims of Finch's tyranny. A small bronze plaque stood at its entrance, bearing the names of Sarah and Lily Vance, and a simple dedication, for those who stood in the way of injustice. Elias, however, found himself adrift. The relentless pursuit of justice had defined his existence for so long that its conclusion left him with an unsettling emptiness. He no longer felt the burning rage, but the grief remained, a constant, dull ache. The man who had emerged from the ashes of his home, the relentless hunter, had no purpose left. He found solace sometimes in the community garden, watching children play amongst the flowers, seeing echoes of Lily in their laughter. He exchanged quiet words with Martin Thorne, who had resurrected his career and was now lauded for his integrity. Martin often urged Elias to write a book to share his story, but Elias always declined. The scars were too deep, the memories too painful to revisit in such a public way. One crisp autumn evening, a year after Finch's conviction, Elias stood alone by Lily's old swing set, now rebuilt and painted a cheerful yellow in the community garden. He ran his hand over the worn seat, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He had done it. He had avenged them. But the cost had been everything. He looked up at the stars, a vast, indifferent expanse. He thought of Lily, her boundless energy, her bright, curious eyes. He closed his own eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his weathered cheek. The hunt was over. The battle was won. But the war within his soul, the one against the silence and the sorrow, was far from it. He carried their memory, not as a burden of vengeance, but as a sacred trust, a reminder of the love that had once filled his world. His purpose had shifted, but the path ahead, though uncertain, was illuminated by the faint, eternal light of his lost family. He would find a way to live, not for revenge but for them, honoring their memory in a world made a little less dark by his sacrifice. The Queen of Spades, once a symbol of terror, had been transformed into a stark reminder of the fragile line between order and chaos, and the enduring power of one man's will to bridge the chasm. The Queen of Spades, once a symbol of terror, had been transformed into a stark reminder of the fragile line between order and chaos, and the enduring power of one man's will to bridge the chasm. The echoes of the courtroom had faded, the headlines had softened, and the fervor of public acclaim had slowly, inevitably waned. Yet for Elias, the cessation of his decade-long crusade had opened up a new, unexpected battleground, the vast, desolate landscape of his own mind. He had spent so long defined by his singular purpose, to avenge Sarah and Lily, that without it he was a ship without a rudder, lost in an ocean of quiet. The silence, once a welcome reprieve from the roar of his vengeance, now felt like a crushing weight, amplifying the ghosts that haunted his every waking moment. He tried to find a routine. He frequented the community garden, tending to a small patch of herbs and native wildflowers, finding a melancholic comfort in the cyclical nature of growth and decay. He observed the children, their innocent laughter, a bittersweet symphony, a stark reminder of what had been stolen from him. Sometimes he'd find himself unconsciously tracing patterns on his palm, an old habit from his watchmaking days, the ghost of tiny gears and intricate mechanisms beneath his fingertips. But the precise work that once brought him such joy now felt distant, alien. His hands, once skilled in delicate craftsmanship, now only remembered the brutal grip of a weapon, the swiftness of a strike. Martin, having achieved a renewed prominence in his career, often invited Elias for coffee or a quiet dinner. He respected Elias's need for solitude, never pressing him to talk, but always offering a steady, reassuring presence. "You saved this city, Elias," Martin would say, his voice low when Elias was particularly lost in thought. "You brought down a colossus. Don't forget that." But Elias knew it hadn't saved him. One afternoon, sitting on a park bench near the garden, Martin approached Elias with a different kind of proposition. "There's something I want to show you," he said, his usual journalistic caution replaced by a hint of intrigue. "Something that might resonate with you." Elias, tired of the relentless introspection, nodded dully. Martin led him to a small, unassuming office, tucked away above a bustling bookstore in a less gentrified part of Havenwood. The sign on the door simply read, "The Havenwood Ledger, Unsolved Cases Community Advocacy." Inside, the air hummed with the quiet energy of purpose. Maps of the city adorned one wall, marked with pins and strings. Another wall was covered in newspaper clippings, timelines, and faded photographs. Faces of the lost, the unheard, the victims of a justice system that had failed them. "This is my new project," Martin explained, gesturing around the room. "After Finch, I realized how many other fires needed putting out. How many shadows still lurked in the corners of Havenwood. I want to give a voice to those who have been silenced, just like you did for Sarah and Lily." He paused, then gestured to a large corkboard easel in the corner, covered by a sheet. "And this is why I brought you here." Martin pulled back the sheet. On the board was a collage of photos and documents, all centered around a single, chilling image, a crude drawing of a playing card. The Queen of Spades. Elias felt a jolt, a cold tremor running down his spine. His eyes narrowed. "This," Martin continued, his voice softer, "is a file I've been working on for months. Before Finch even, a series of seemingly unconnected disappearances and unsolved murders over the past 2 decades. All young women, all, at some point, had a Queen of Spades left near their last known location or in their belongings, often dismissed as a coincidence by the police. Elias walked closer to the board, his fingers brushing against the rough paper of a faded photograph. This wasn't the Jackals. Finch's organization used the card as a territorial mark, a declaration of ownership after an act of destruction or intimidation. This felt different, more personal, more insidious. The police always wrote it off, Martin explained, claiming it was copycat crimes or just a sick individual's signature. But the patterns, they're too precise, too consistent. It's not random, and it certainly isn't the Jackals' MO. They deal in profit and power. This feels like something else entirely. Elias felt a spark ignite within him, a flicker of the old fire. It wasn't the searing inferno of vengeance, but a steady, focused warmth. A new purpose, slowly unfurling itself like a delicate watch spring. "Why haven't I heard about this?" he asked, his voice a low growl, already shifting into investigation mode. Because the cases were deliberately fragmented, buried in different precincts, often labeled as runaways or cold, isolated incidents. The perpetrator, whoever they are, is meticulously careful. They leave just enough breadcrumbs to confuse, but never enough to lead anywhere definitive. Elias spent the rest of the day in Martin's office, devouring the files. He saw the threads, the subtle connections that police, bound by jurisdictions and conventional thinking, had missed. He recognized the cold, calculating precision, a ghost in the machine of the justice system. The emptiness within him began to recede, replaced by a sense of urgency, a familiar hum of purpose. His journey was indeed not over. It had merely shifted. Over the next few months, Elias Vance, the quiet watchmaker turned avenger, slowly transformed again. He still visited the garden, but now his hands found solace not just in tending plants, but in the meticulous organization of case files. Martin Thorne became his invaluable partner, providing journalistic resources, research capabilities, and a network of contacts that Elias, with his shadowed past, couldn't access. Their office above the bookstore became a new kind of workshop. He noticed a chilling geographical progression, a subtle shift that suggested a predator constantly evolving, constantly adapting. The victims, predominantly young women in their late teens to early 20s, shared a similar physical type: dark hair, slender build, often artistic or quiet in nature. They weren't targets of opportunity, they were carefully selected. Elias delved back into forensic psychology, now with a laser focus. He cross-referenced cold cases from neighboring counties, expanding the geographical scope, and confirmed a terrifying hypothesis. This wasn't just a Havenwood problem. This was a regional threat, meticulously hidden in plain sight. He observed that the time between incidents grew longer, suggesting careful planning, a man who savored the hunt. The Queen of Spades wasn't just a calling card, it was a taunt, a symbol of psychological dominion. Their investigation led them down a myriad of dead ends, through dusty archives and into the dark corners of the internet. They interviewed grieving families, trying to unearth forgotten details, memories that might spark a new lead. Elias, his face now etched with a quiet, hardened empathy, connected with these families on a profound level, a shared understanding of loss that transcended words. He wasn't just looking for clues, he was looking for echoes of Sarah and Lily in every forgotten smile, every lost dream. One particular case caught Elias's attention: the disappearance of a young art student named Clara Davies, 5 years prior. Her case had been dismissed as a runaway, despite her meticulous nature and her close ties to her family. Her apartment had been immaculate, save for a single item, a Queen of Spades playing card, neatly placed on her easel. What struck Elias was not just the card, but a subtle detail in Clara's final painting left on the easel. An abstract landscape, but with a barely perceptible, almost hidden symbol. A stylized, ancient runic symbol, subtly incorporated into the brushstrokes. Elias showed the photograph of the painting to Martin. "This isn't just art," he mused. This is a message. Martin, a connoisseur of cryptic clues, recognized the pattern. It's a specific Nordic rune, he said, pulling out a book on ancient symbols. The Alias rune. It symbolizes protection, defense, or in some contexts, a warning. This was the breakthrough they needed. Elias theorized that Clara, sensing danger or perhaps having already been abducted and forced to paint, had left a silent plea, a hidden clue for someone who would truly see it. The rune, combined with the Queen of Spades, transformed the card from a mere symbol of terror into a dark, personalized signature. The killer wasn't just leaving a card, he was leaving a story, a chilling psychological narrative. Their research into the Alias rune and its association with the Queen of Spades led them to a niche online forum dedicated to obscure occult symbology and playing card lore. Among the countless theories and esoteric discussions, Elias found a series of posts from an anonymous user, Shadow Weaver, who seemed unusually knowledgeable about the specific combination of the Alias rune and the Queen of Spades. Shadow Weaver's posts delved into the historical interpretations of the Queen of Spades as a dark goddess, a harbinger of ill fortune, and a symbol of occult power, often associated with a specific ancient sect that practiced ritualistic cleansing through abduction. The posts were disturbingly detailed, almost academic in their precision, yet threaded with an undercurrent of something deeply unsettling. Elias and Martin spent weeks trying to trace Shadow Weaver. It was a digital ghost hunt, navigating encrypted networks and anonymizing proxies. With the help of a brilliant, if eccentric hacker, Martin knew from his old investigative days, a young woman known only as Cypher, they finally managed to penetrate Shadow Weaver's digital defenses. What they found sent a chill deeper than anything Elias had yet experienced. Shadow Weaver wasn't just an armchair theorist. They were meticulously documenting the disappearances, often with chillingly accurate predictions of where the next offering might occur. The posts included precise timelines, psychological profiles of the victims that mirrored Elias's own deductions, and even subtle taunts aimed at law enforcement for their inability to connect the dots. Most disturbingly, they found a hidden, encrypted section of Shadow Weaver's profile, a private journal detailing the rituals, the cleansing, and the perverse satisfaction derived from their acts. It was the mind of a serial killer, laid bare in chilling prose, and in that journal, they found a name. The shepherd, it appeared, was not just a killer. He was a cult leader, grooming disciples, propagating a dark, ancient ideology. The location associated with Shadow Weaver's IP address led them to a remote, heavily forested area on the very edge of Havenwood County, a place known locally as the Whispering Pines, a name that had taken on an ominous tone in recent years due to hikers going missing. There, hidden from the world, was a complex of rundown cabins and an abandoned, decaying lodge. This was not just a hiding place, it was a sanctuary for their dark rituals. Elias felt a cold dread mixed with a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just about bringing down a criminal enterprise. This was about confronting pure evil. He knew the local police wouldn't touch this without irrefutable evidence, and even then, their resources were limited. They would need a coordinated effort, a tactical strike. Martin, ever the pragmatist, immediately alerted an old FBI contact, Agent Rebecca Thorne, no relation to anyone else named Thorne, the source of running, dark humor. Agent Thorne was a seasoned profiler, known for her relentless pursuit of serial offenders and her willingness to delve into the psychological depths of human depravity. She listened to Elias and Martin's findings with a growing sense of urgency, her skeptical facade slowly crumbling as they presented the overwhelming, meticulously gathered evidence. This shepherd is an ideological killer, Agent Thorne concluded, after reviewing Shadow Weaver's journal entries. He's not driven by greed or power in the conventional sense. He's driven by a perverse belief system, a need to purify through sacrifice. These aren't just murders, Mr. Vance, they are rituals. The FBI, now fully mobilized, began to plan a raid on the Whispering Pines compound. Elias, despite Agent Thorne's warnings against civilian involvement, insisted on being part of the operation. His intimate knowledge of the cases, his intuitive understanding of the killer's mindset, and his sheer determination made him an invaluable, if unconventional, asset. The night of the raid was cold, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Elias moved through the forest with the silent grace of a seasoned hunter, his senses heightened, his heart a steady drumbeat in the darkness. FBI tactical teams, moving like shadows, surrounded the compound. The intelligence gathered by Cypher had revealed several structures: the main lodge, a few smaller cabins, and a secluded, fortified bunker hidden beneath the dense foliage. As they breached the main lodge, they found a macabre scene. An altar adorned with arcane symbols, chilling artifacts, and a disturbing collection of personal effects belonging to the missing women. But no one was there. The lodge was a shrine, a testament to their twisted faith, but not the active lair. "They're in the bunker," Elias whispered, a chilling certainty in his voice. The shepherd would want to be underground, connected to the roots of their power. The tactical team moved towards the coordinates Cypher had provided for the hidden bunker. It was a formidable structure, disguised and heavily reinforced. After a tense standoff, the FBI breached the entrance, a heavy steel door giving way with a deafening crash. Inside, the air was heavy with incense and the metallic tang of fear. The bunker was a cavernous space, dimly lit by candles, its walls adorned with more unsettling symbols. In the center, surrounded by his flock, a handful of unnervingly calm, almost hypnotic young men and women, stood the shepherd. He was not what Elias expected. Not a hulking brute, but a gaunt, ascetic man, his eyes burning with an unsettling zeal. He held a ceremonial dagger, its blade gleaming ominously in the flickering light. And beside him, her face pale with terror, was a young woman, bound and gagged, dressed in white, a terrified sacrificial lamb. "Welcome, unbelievers." The shepherd's voice, though soft, resonated with a chilling authority. "You come to defile our sacred ritual, but the Queen of Spades will have her due." Elias recognized the bound woman. It was a new victim, abducted just days prior, a young musician named Clara Bell, whose disappearance had just hit the local news. She was to be their next offering. The standoff was tense. FBI agents, weapons raised, ordered the shepherd and his followers to surrender. But the shepherd, with a messianic glint in his eyes, simply smiled, raising the dagger towards Clara Bell's throat. "The cleansing must be completed," he intoned. In that split second, Elias moved. He wasn't thinking, he was reacting. His body, trained by years of relentless self-preservation and fueled by the ghosts of his past, moved with a speed that surprised even the seasoned FBI agents. He slipped through the tactical formation, a dark blur against the flickering candlelight. He tackled the shepherd, forcing the dagger away from Clara. The cult leader, despite his gaunt appearance, fought with a surprising, almost supernatural strength, fueled by his twisted conviction. His followers, now enraged, lunged at Elias and the agents. Chaos erupted. Elias wrestled with the shepherd, their struggle a desperate dance of life and death amidst the clanging of metal and the shouts of the agents. The shepherd tried to regain the dagger, his eyes burning with a psychotic hatred. "You are defiling the sacred. You will join them," he hissed. But Elias, remembering Sarah and Lily, remembering the silent screams of all the women who had come before, fought with a primal fury. He disarmed the shepherd, kicking the ceremonial dagger across the floor, where it skittered to a stop near Agent Thorne. With a swift, brutal strike, Elias incapacitated the cult leader, slamming him against the altar, knocking him unconscious. The remaining followers, their leader fallen, were quickly subdued by the FBI. Clara Bell, traumatized but alive, was immediately tended to by paramedics who had been staged outside. The bunker, once a chamber of horrors, was now a crime scene, its dark secrets finally exposed to the harsh light of justice. In the aftermath, Elias stood amidst the chaos, his chest heaving, his body bruised but whole. Agent Thorne approached him, her face grim but with a hint of respect. "You saved her, Mr. Vance," she said, nodding towards Clarabelle. "You risked everything." Elias looked at the unconscious shepherd, then at the recovered ceremonial dagger. He felt no triumph, no exhilaration, only a profound exhaustion. He had stopped a monster, prevented another tragedy, but the cost of carrying such darkness within him was immeasurable. The shepherd, identified as Elias Thorne, no relation to any of the other Thorns, a cosmic joke that made Martin chuckle grimly, and his followers were arrested. The evidence from the bunker, combined with Shadow Weaver's digital journal, was damning. Elias Vance, once again, found himself testifying, his quiet, compelling voice laying bare the chilling details of a hidden cult, a series of ritualistic murders, and the systematic failures that allowed them to persist for decades. The trials were sensational. Elias Thorne, the shepherd, was revealed to be a charismatic, highly intelligent psychopath who had twisted ancient beliefs into a justification for his heinous acts, manipulating impressionable individuals into his cult. He was convicted on multiple counts of murder, abduction, and conspiracy. Sentenced to life imprisonment, his reign of terror finally brought to an end. His followers received lesser sentences, many of them victims of his psychological manipulation. With the shepherd behind bars, Havenwood and the surrounding region began to collectively exhale. The whispers of missing hikers and unexplained disappearances ceased. The community garden for Sarah and Lily Vance gained a new, silent meaning. A memorial not just to their loss, but to the continued vigilance against the darkness that lurked in plain sight. Elias, however, found himself back in that familiar space of quiet emptiness. He had stopped the Jackals, he had dismantled the shepherd's cult. He had fought battles no one else dared to, pulled the city back from the brink of corruption and despair. But the fight had carved deep grooves into his soul, leaving him a man profoundly changed, perhaps irrevocably so. He still visited the community garden. He still exchanged quiet words with Martin Thorne. He even occasionally allowed himself to observe the intricacies of an antique clock in a dusty shop window, a faint echo of his former self. He found solace in small acts of kindness, in anonymity, in the silent knowledge that he had made a difference. One day, while walking through the garden, he noticed a young woman sitting quietly by the bronze plaque dedicated to Sarah and Lily. It was Clarabelle, the musician he had saved from the shepherd. She looked up as he approached, a faint, grateful smile touching her lips. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft yet clear. Elias simply nodded, unable to articulate the complex swirl of emotions her gratitude evoked. He sat beside her on the bench, the warmth of the late afternoon sun filtering through the leaves above them. They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment, two souls forever bound by a shared trauma, yet on different trajectories of healing. Open mics. It's still hard sometimes. The silence, but the music helps. It fills the void. She glanced at him, her eyes holding a depth that belied her youth. "You know about voids, don't you?" Elias looked at her, truly seeing her. He saw not just a victim, but a survivor, finding her own way to rebuild amidst the wreckage. "Yes," he admitted, his voice rough. "More than I care to." "What do you do now?" Clara asked, her curiosity gentle, respectful. "After everything?" He paused, considering. "I walk," he said. "I read. Sometimes I help Martin with his ledger. Mostly I try to remember what it felt like before." He didn't elaborate. Clara didn't press. She understood. Their conversation, though brief, was a small, delicate turning point for Elias. Clarabelle, in her vulnerability and resilience, mirrored a part of himself he had almost forgotten. The quiet strength to simply be, to find purpose in the mundane, to heal not through vengeance, but through living. Over the next few months, these small connections began to multiply. Elias started volunteering more regularly at the Havenwood Ledger, not just on cold cases, but assisting Martin with local community issues, helping families navigate bureaucratic nightmares, uncovering small-scale injustices that fell beneath the radar of official channels. He found a quiet satisfaction in these smaller victories, in helping ordinary people reclaim a sliver of peace. It wasn't the grand cinematic confrontation he'd once sought, but it was honest, tangible, and profound. profoundly human. He discovered a latent talent for community organizing, for listening to grievances, for connecting disparate threads of information to find solutions. The same meticulous observation and analytical skills he'd honed in his quest for vengeance now served a different, more constructive purpose. He became a quiet advocate, a silent force for good in the corners of Havenwood that still struggled with the aftermath of the Jackals and the Shepherd's influence. His old apartment, once a chaotic war room, slowly transformed. The crime scene photos were gone, replaced by blueprints for a new community center, reports on city planning, and a growing collection of books on urban renewal and restorative justice. He even dusted off some of his watchmaking tools, not to build, but to repair. He started volunteering at a local community workshop, teaching intricate repairs to troubled youth, finding a meditative peace in the delicate precision of the craft. His hands, once clenched in fury, now moved with a calm, steady grace, passing on a skill, a legacy of patience and detail. One chilly morning, a year and a half after Finch's conviction, Martin Thorne burst into Elias's small office at the Ledger, a rare look of excitement on his usually stoic face. "Elias, you're not going to believe this. Remember that old cold case? The disappearance of Mayor Thompson's aide, Elias Vance, back when the Jackals were first gaining power." Elias, momentarily startled by the sudden influx of urgency, leaned forward. Elias Vance, no relation, but the name always caught his attention. He remembered the file, a baffling disappearance, ruled a runaway, but with too many inconsistencies. A small nagging doubt had always lingered in the back of his mind. "Well," Martin continued, barely containing his enthusiasm, "I just got a tip. Anonymous, encrypted, but it points to an old warehouse on the waterfront, one of the Jackals' original strongholds, before they expanded. The tip says there's a hidden compartment, a sealed room, and it explicitly mentioned Elias Vance." A jolt ran through Alias. The Jackals, even though Finch was gone, their tendrils of evil still had unseen roots, still held secrets. This wasn't about vengeance, not anymore. This was about truth, about setting another ghost free. They spent the next few days preparing. Martin, with his renewed journalistic leverage, managed to secure a limited search warrant citing new information on suspected money laundering operations. The warehouse, long abandoned, was slated for demolition, providing a convenient, low-profile window for investigation. On the appointed day, Elias and Martin, accompanied by two weary, cynical detectives from the Havenwood PD, who Martin had convinced to join with the promise of easy overtime and potential career boosts, arrived at the crumbling edifice. The air inside was thick with dust, the smell of decay, and the ghostly echoes of illicit activity. Elias, guided by the anonymous tip's precise details, found the spot. Behind a stacked wall of decaying crates and rusted machinery, a section of the concrete wall seemed subtly different, a faint hairline fracture marking a hidden seam. Using crowbars and sheer brute force, they pried open the cleverly disguised panel. Behind it, a narrow, dark passage led into a small, windowless room. The air was cold, stagnant, and heavy with the scent of old paper and something else, something metallic and foreboding. As Martin flicked on a powerful flashlight, the beam cut through the gloom, revealing a stark, chilling scene. The room was Spartan, almost monastic. A cot, a small table, a single chair. And on the table, meticulously arranged, was a collection of documents. Old ledgers, handwritten notes, and a journal, a small leather-bound journal, its pages filled with elegant script. "Elias Vance," Martin whispered, his voice hushed with reverence and horror. "She was held here, a prisoner." As they began to sift through the documents, a shocking truth slowly unfolded. Elias Vance hadn't run away. She had been abducted by the Jackals. Not for ransom, but for information. The Jackals had wanted to know the mayor's vulnerabilities, his hidden connections, the city's future development plans, everything they could exploit. The journal was Eleanor's testament, her quiet act of defiance. In meticulous detail, she had chronicled her abduction, her imprisonment, and the brutal interrogations she endured. But more importantly, she had documented everything she knew about the Jackals' early operations, their key players, their methods of bribery and extortion, even before Alistair Finch had fully consolidated his power. It was a terrifying, invaluable historical record, filling in the missing pieces of the Jackals' rise to power, connecting dots that even Elias hadn't been able to fully trace. Her final entry was chilling. They know I know too much. They're moving me to a more permanent solution. I won't see the sun again, but perhaps one day someone will find me and know the truth. There was no mention of where she was being taken, only a sense of profound resignation. Her body had never been found. This room, this journal, was all that remained of her. Elias felt a surge of profound sadness, mixed with a renewed sense of purpose. Even in death, Elias Vance had fought back, leaving behind a legacy of truth. This wasn't a violent end, but a quiet, prolonged terror, a testament to the Jackals' insidious cruelty. The detectives, their cynicism replaced by a grim determination, secured the evidence. The journal, combined with Elias's existing files on Finch and the Jackals, would reopen old wounds, shed light on unpunished crimes, and potentially bring down even more of their lingering network. In the weeks that followed, the story of Elias Vance's journal broke. It was a sensation, a historical bombshell that forced a reckoning with Havenwood's past. Old cases were reopened. Corrupt officials, who had escaped justice during the initial Jackals takedown due to lack of direct evidence, now faced scrutiny. The anonymous tipster, it turned out, was a low-level Jackals operative, now in witness protection, who had stumbled upon the journal years ago and finally found the courage to expose the truth after Finch's downfall. Elias, once again, found himself in the public eye, though he preferred to remain in the background, assisting Martin Thorne with the narrative. He gave one rare interview, speaking not of his own heroism, but of Elias Vance's quiet courage. She was a true hero, he told the reporter, his voice filled with respect. She fought for truth, even when she knew it would cost her everything. We owe her that truth, and we owe her justice. The discovery brought a new kind of closure, not for his own family, but for the wider community of Havenwood. It was a cleansing, a turning of a dark page in the city's history. And for Elias, it solidified his new path. He was no longer just an avenger. He was a keeper of truth, a defender of the voiceless. He continued his work with the Havenwood Ledger, slowly transforming it into a vital community resource. He taught the young people at the workshop not just watchmaking, but critical thinking, the importance of asking questions, of looking beyond the surface. He became a mentor, a quiet beacon of integrity in a world that desperately needed it. His apartment, instead of being filled with ghosts, began to fill with life. He acquired a small, playful dog, a rescue named Cog, whose boundless energy and unconditional affection began to chip away at the walls he had built around his heart. He started cooking again, experimenting with recipes, finding a simple joy in the act of creation. One afternoon, almost 3 years after the fire, Elias found himself back in the community garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Clarabelle was there again, sitting by the plaque, a sketchbook in her lap. She was no longer pale with terror. Her eyes held a calm, artistic spark. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she asked, gesturing to the garden, to the vibrant colors, the children's laughter echoing in the distance. "Yes," Elias agreed, a genuine, unburdened smile gracing his lips. "It is." He sat beside her. She showed him her sketchbook, not of dark, abstract landscapes, but of detailed, vibrant portraits of the garden, of the people who tended it, of the children playing. Life. "I started a small foundation," Clara told him, her voice soft but resolute, "for victims of violent crime, to help them find their voices again, to heal." She looked at him, her eyes shining. "It's what you taught me, what you did for me." Elias felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't happiness, not in the way he remembered it with Sarah and Lily. But it was peace, it was purpose, it was connection. He thought of Sarah and Lily, not with the searing pain of loss, but with a gentle, profound love. He had honored their memory, not just by avenging their deaths, but by choosing life, by choosing to mend, to protect, to build. The Queen of Spades, once a symbol of his darkest despair, was now a faded memory, replaced by the living, breathing testament of the garden. of the lives he had touched, of the hope he had rekindled. His journey indeed was not over. It was a continuous path, winding through the complexities of human suffering and resilience. But now, he walked it with a lighter step, guided not by the shadows of vengeance, but by the quiet, enduring light of compassion and a profound commitment to justice in all its forms. Elias Vance, the quiet watchmaker, had found his true purpose, not as an avenger, but as a guardian of Havenwood's fragile peace, forever vigilant, forever dedicated, forever woven into the intricate, delicate fabric of life itself. He knew the darkness would always lurk, but he also knew that the light, even a faint one, would always find a way to break through.